EVHI is a first-person shooter game where the player needs to write Chinese characters in order to obtain magic and shoot towards obstacles or enemies. It follows the story of a Chinese native speaker who has lost their memories and their native language. The characters go through a series of challenges designed by a fictional scientist in order to relearn words and rediscovers their memories along the way. The game has 5 characters, which corresponds to 5 types of magic: fire, water, bow, wind, and protection. The game consists of 3 modes. Intro mode, where the player learns the characters and gets snippets of memories at the end. Dungeon mode, where the player gets to train in hallways with sequential obstacles free of urgency, and lobbies where enemies attack and the player needs to react with urgency. Infinite mode, where the player faces infinite enemies until they get a set percentage of competence on all characters. In order to play the game, there are different devices used by 2 hands: the hand that writes and looks around, and the hand that navigates and executes magic. For the hand that writes, the device used is the Wacom tablet, as it's the most optimal writing experience we can get. The pointer data is the same as a mouse or a touchpad, but much more precise for character recognition. For the other hand, there are 2 options: Joy-Con or keyboard. The mapped buttons of the Joy-Con correspond to actions in the game, such as moving with the joystick, opening and closing writing interface with ZL, showing grimoire with D-pad up, or attacking with L. The attack can also be performed with a throw-in gesture. Upon recognizing a written character or attacking, the Joy-Con would vibrate, give the player an extra indication. For those who don't have a Joy-Con, a simple keyboard input is also available. The mapping of the keys favors an QWERTY layout.
In order to recognize the characters written by the player, we use the P-dollar recognition system invented by Vatavu, Anthony, and Wobrock. The system takes the handwritten characters and compares their point clouds to a set of expert samples. It then classifies the character with varying degrees of confidence according to the closest match it finds in the database. The game adapts to the level of mastery of the player in order to better accompany them throughout their learning journey. To do this, the system modelizes the player's mastery of various skills using a version of the Bayesian Knowledge Tracer model, or BKT, proposed by Corbett and Anderson, which has been widely used in intelligent tutoring systems. In our game, the system updates its model when the player interacts with enemies and obstacles. Let's assume the game has 3 characters for the sake of an example. Here, we initially estimate the player's mastery of the character for water to be around 60%. After the player kills a fire-type enemy using a water spell, we increase this estimation to 80%. Using this model allows the system to keep track of the player's strengths and weaknesses. This in turn allows us to introduce several forms of adaptation to the game in order to personalize the learner's experience according to their needs. In particular, the enemies and obstacles in the dungeons in infinite mode are procedurally generated in such a way that it helps the player practice the characters that they are weaker in, while also helping them maintain their self-confidence and reviewing other characters. This is done using a softmax function which creates a probability distribution where the likelihood of drawing each character is inversely proportional to the player's mastery. For example, a player who is weak at writing the character for wind and strong for the fire and water characters will be shown more dust enemies while still occasionally getting some water and fire ones. In addition to this, the game also has an adaptive help interface which displays visual aids to help the players remember the characters, their meanings, and their stroke order. The visual aid for characters that have been mastered past the basic threshold will be hidden by default. This is to encourage the player to try remembering the character on their own. Finally, the game's infinite mode also automatically ends once the player has achieved satisfactory mastery of all the characters presented in the game.